So, as you guys know, I effing love science. Science is a big focus of this channel, and I have a long history with science. I met science back, and I think around grade 10. And when I met him, I'm like, hey, science, does God exist? And he went, well, I tried putting God in a test tube, and it didn't work. And so God doesn't exist. And I became an atheist there, and that's a position I've held ever since then. Science also told me that the Earth is a sentient organism called Gaia, and that North America rests on the back of a giant turtle. So those are things that science has told me, and science sent me this article. So we're going to read this. I think it's more important than ever that we listen to science when he tells us things because of COVID-19. So, like, if people are saying, well, there's no evidence for this or there's no evidence for that, like, that's not what you should be looking at. What you should be looking at is what science tells you. Because science has press conferences, he goes on TV, and he says, like, all this stuff. So, I'm tired of these jokesters and these, like, reactionaries and dinosaurs who don't listen to science and what he tells them to believe in. So, we're going to read this article. As you guys know, I like watching reptile videos on YouTube, and I see a lot of videos talking about the dangers of hybridization in captive populations. Humans in particular, and this article talk about it, are really bad for hybridizing different subspecies together. So, like, when I'm watching these videos, they quote science, and science says, look, you can't let two breeds of garter snake mix together, because if you do, then it's a threat to the native population of the two species that combine. And they could go extinct. And if different subspecies go extinct, that's a massive tragedy. So we're just going to read through this science article. So let's see here. Hybridization may drive rare taxa to extinction through genetic swamping. Where the rare form is replaced by hybrids or by demographic swamping, where population growth rates are reduced due to the wasteful production of maladaptive hybrids. It's a big problem. Conversely, hybridization, okay, let's see here. I'm just going to scroll down. Human involvement is associated with increased risk and high reproductive isolation with reduced risk. Oops. Science didn't help me there. I clicked the wrong thing. It has long been recognized that hybridization, defined here as mating, or sex, I guess, between genetically distinguishable populations can have a variety of evolutionary outcomes. These include outcomes that maintain or increase diversity, such as stable hybrid zones, the evolutionary rescue of small inbred populations, the origin and transfer of adaptations, the reinforcement of reproductive isolation, and the formation of new hybrid lineages. Alternatively, hybridization could decrease diversity through the breakdown of reproductive barriers, the merger of previously distinct evolutionary lineages, and the extinction of populations or species. So what they're saying here is it's a big problem, because if you get these subspecies and you hybridize them, then the parent species disappear, and the evolutionary, I guess you could say, capital that was gained by both species kind of disappears. There are two main mechanisms by which hybridization can lead to extinction. If hybrid fitness is strongly reduced relative to that of parental individuals, and hybridization is common, population growth rates or one or both parental lineages may decline. So what they're saying here is more hybrids mean the parent populations will reproduce less. Interesting. Let's see here. Okay. The population growth rates are one or both parental lineages may decline below replacement rates due to wasted reproductive effort. So they're saying, like, a key factor in the extinction of a specific subspecies is if it goes to sub-replacement birth levels. Following the terminology, we refer to this mechanism as demographic swamping. On the other hand, if outbreeding depression is less severe and population growth rates exceed replacement rates, then one or both parental lineages may be replaced by hybrids, a process typically referred to as genetic swamping. Admixture may occur even while parental phenotypical differences are maintained by divergent natural selection. Because hybridization is an absorbing process, at some point, all phenotypically pure individuals of one or both parental lineages may have a hybrid ancestry, leading to the extinction of pure parental genomes. Okay, so we have a picture here. We're just going to go through this. Let's see here. These early reviews provide little guidance on the likelihood. Okay, so literature survey. We're just going to go. I skimmed through this, but this is super long. And science doesn't like to get bored when I take too long to read things. So I'm just going to read this before we move on. So this is some definitions. Hybridization outcome. Whether the predicted outcome of hybridization would be loss of genetically pure individuals for one of the species, but preservation of the genetic material from that species in hybrid or introgressed individuals. Complete loss of genetic material for one of the species, demographic swamping. Preservation of genetically pure individuals for both species in the foreseeable future. Okay, so in some cases it's not possible to predict whether upon the extinction of genetically pure individuals, genetic material for the species would be preserved in hybrid individuals. So what they're saying is if you mix two subspecies or two interbreedable species together, certain traits can be permanently lost and aren't transferred over to the hybrid population. Okay, let's see here. So skipping ahead a bit to the literature review, this is kind of interesting. So they found that human involvement increases the chance of hybridization and the chance of the extinction of a particular subspecies. So after excluding the 5 cases where the risk of extinction was unclear, 72% of studies with human involvement reported an extinction, while only 47% of studies without human involvement reported a threat. Among the cases, let's see here. 55% involved husbandry or agriculture, 54% involved invasive species. So what they're saying here is humans have a bad track record of bringing in invasive species that destroy the genetically pure indigenous population. Climate change was infrequently associated. Let's see here. Extinction risk through hybridization is lower when there are reproductive barriers and higher in the absence of reproductive barriers. So they're saying one of the main ways that we can try to prevent hybridization, the extinction of the parent species, is through reproductive barriers. So that's kind of interesting. Let's see here. Sample sizes are too limited to test. Let's just scroll down. So here they're saying in cases where the hybrid, okay, so if the more populous species is male and the less populous species is female, then there's a much greater chance of the extinction of the parent species. Let's see here. While early review established hybridization as a threat to population persistence, questions remain about genetic and ecological factors that influence the likelihood and speed of extinction. Okay, so these are some things that increase the rate of species extinction. The first attempts at, consider hybridization between a locally common native and locally rare invasive species that were fixed from different alleles at a single locus. Reproduction isolation was incorporated as F1 and backcross sterility. I'm assuming that means that the hybrid population can't reproduce with the preceding one. Let's see here. In addition, only invasive individuals were allowed to migrate into the environment where the hybridization took place. Okay, so it's just the one-way movement of the population. With no hybridization and at moderate invader immigration rates and relative fitness, complete displacement of the native population was always observed. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if a local population faces immigration from an outbound population, they're always displaced and destroyed, according to this. Interesting. Let's see here. Only when one or both these parameters were considerably reduced, that means interbreeding or reduction in the rate of immigration. I don't know why they'd use the term immigration. Someone should probably email them about that. The risk of native extinction did not increase with hybridization when hybrids were sterile, as would be expected under democratic swamping. So I guess just a little bit. Okay, the down button again. In line with genetic models, extinction risk of the native taxon was predicted to increase as its competitive ability and initial frequency decreased. So if they're less able to compete in their modern environment because there's downward factors on them and their percentage of the population decreases, they're more likely to become extinct. Selfing rate also ranked high among parameters likely to prevent extinction. Let's see here. So this is just a thing about reproductive barriers. They're saying here it's important to have reproductive barriers between different species, because that results in the extinction of the local population if you don't have those. Let's see here. Also, after hybridization, in this case, following hybridization, native individuals are less numerous than non-natives and therefore more prone to chance extinctions in unstable habitats. Likewise, the reverse income stability reduced the risk of native extinction. Indeed, so what they're saying, if there's any kind of instability in the environment that these groups are operating in, it becomes a lot more likely that the native species will get destroyed. Okay, so this is a bit about the role of humans in hybridization and extinction of subspecies. Hybridization has long been known to be associated with human activities. Such activities may lead to contact between previously isolated taxa, making hybridization possible in the first place. They're saying different animal species will live in different parts of the world and they might be related. I guess something maybe like geckos. I don't know about monitor lizards or frogs, but you have related species that are close enough to breed to one another in different parts of the world. And humans, in our hubris, kind of put them together and it creates these hybrids that cause extinction. Let's see here. Below, we describe some of the empirical literature that links human activities with extinction risk through hybridization. The clearest link between human activities and extinction risk through hybridization comes from actively managed species that are intentionally released into native habitats. So what they're saying is the big problem here is humans take these species from other parts of the world and they release them into the native habitats of another species that's genetically similar enough to breed with them. So, I mean, that makes sense to me. Let's see here. Examples include the widely stocked rainbow trout, which is delicious, by the way, which are eroding the genetic identities of native populations. Similarly, the release of game birds for hunting may pose a risk for wild relatives, such as black ducks. Let's see here. Such intentional release can lead to large differences in the abundance of native versus captive bred individuals. In mallard ducks, for example, the number of released individuals often exceeds that of the wild individuals by a factor of 10. So they're saying that humans are taking all these species, all these animals of one species, and dropping them into an area where they outnumber the native population, and that increases the extinction rates. Where the number of stocking events in Canadian lakes was shown to be positively correlated with levels of hybridization. For example, hybridization is sometimes used to improve the performance of captive bred stock, which may in turn facilitate hybridization with their parent species in the wild. Hybridization with maladaptive or inbred individuals may lower the average fitness of the population, thereby threatening wild taxa. So they're saying oftentimes these hybrids are not suited to the environment that the parental creatures were based in. So they face a lot of problems from that. Let's see here. Changes in management practices such as reducing stalking, more careful choice of stock species and habitat, the release of non-reproductive individuals could avert expiration in a number of cases. They're saying the best way to prevent extinction is to manage they use the term immigration, so to manage the immigration of one species to another category, be more careful with which species who they actually release, and conduct sterilization. That's pretty hardcore. They're saying you have to exterminate if you're going to be releasing a population into another population's area. You should sterilize them first. The unintentional release of captive bred individuals appear to be less frequently associated with extinction release through hybridization. Examples include domesticated ferrets that hybridize with native European species in Britain. Okay, so we have cats. Okay, let's see here. Introduction of non-native taxa. Let's see here. Hybridization involving non-native species may create unique problems. This is especially true for invasives, that is, taxa that have obtained a wide distribution in the introduced range. Because introduced taxa have not co-evolved with native conures, reproductive barriers may be weaker on average than native populations. These factors can lead to high and potentially asymmetric hybridization rates. Interesting. Okay, so while theoretical and empirical studies above, let's see here. Indeed, theoretical analysis suggests that hybridization involving invasive species is frequently a threat to the native species. Interesting. Let's see here. Invading taxon is primarily, argue the risk incurred by the native population when confronted by an invading taxon is primarily demographic rather than genetic. I just like to take a second and say once again, I effing love science. I love science. I think we should do exactly what science tells us to do. And I think when we move forward on conservation management, we should really take the findings of this peer-reviewed paper to heart. Let's see here. Hybridization between invasive and native taxa are expected to become even more problematic in the future. Interesting choice of word. Increased international trade and climate change may increase the number of invasive species and the likelihood of hybridization. So what they're saying is because of global warming, you're going to have populations fleeing affected areas to go to less effective areas, and those populations are going to wipe out the native population of that area. Anderson emphasized the importance of human disturbance as a driver of hybridization. Let's see here. Disturbed habitats are heterogeneous and ecologically unstable. Outbreeding depression refers to the decreased fitness of hybrids relative to their parents. Outbreeding depression can result from the disruption of local adaptation, the breakup of gene complexes. Let me just skim through this. Selfish gene elements. If outbreeding depression is high, even low rates of hybridization may be fatal for the initial population. As a consequence, risks from outbreeding depression sometimes are on par by those posed by inbreeding depression. Okay, so genetic rescue outcome on our literature survey is hybridization, resulting in a net fitness gain to one or both taxa without the threat of extinction. So they're saying this is a case where the two species come together, they mate and have offspring, and it doesn't threaten the extinction of either or make them less adapted to the environment that they live in. Let's see here. In genetic rescue, hybrids have an equal or greater fitness relative to at least one of the parental lines. Also for genetic rescue, gene flow is limited over time or in degree. So they say here, genetic rescue is a rare outcome in our literature survey. definitively only a single case where hybridization was human mediated. Okay, so they're saying here in virtually all cases, hybridization leads to the extinction of both parent species and the creation of a hybrid group that is less adapt and suffers from more health problems than the other two. Let's see here. So their conclusion for that is our literature survey suggests that genetic rescue, that is the improvement through hybridization, is a less likely outcome of unintentional hybridization events, especially when hybridization is continuous or between highly divergent taxa. Let's see here. Let's go down. This one's interesting. We specifically provide quantitative support for the long recognized association between human activities, hybridization, and extinction risk. Surprisingly, husbandry and species introductions contributed more to this than did human disturbance, although this might be a consequence of ascertainment bias. So they're saying here humans are deliberately moving these populations around. We also confirm predictions that extinction risk is higher in the absence of reproductive barriers, that is, between the different species, and when hybridization integration is in the direction of the threatened species. So that is, the threatened species is breeding out more than the other species is breeding in, I guess. Let's see here. So here's some of the recommendations. From a more practical standpoint, can our results inform management strategy? So, what are the policy implications of the study? We contend that they can, in part, by strengthening barriers to the introduction of hybridization-prone species, sharpening decisions making concerning the release of captive bred individuals and the appropriate use of hybridization for genetic rescue, and prioritizing the restoration of mature and diverse habitats that are resistant to hybrid production and establishment. They're saying they have to restore the native homes of the species under threat and reduce the inflow or perhaps even remove the invasive species. Let's see here. Our review analysis also points to gaps in our knowledge about the role prevention of hybridization and species extinction. The quality of this work is highly variable. So I got to say that was an interesting article, and I think it's really important for us to focus on science because science is awesome, and science can tell us all kinds of different things about the world. And in this case, they're telling us that hybridizing two related species that can interbreed leads to dysgenics, that humans forcibly introducing a foreign population into another species' homeland can have devastating results. It makes extinction more likely, and it produces offspring that are less genetically fit than the two parents. So, as I've said, I love science. This is a evolutionary journal, peer-reviewed, of course. I mean, it's from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, from the National Institutes of Health. I mean, I don't know if you can get that much more prestigious than that. So, interesting article. Enjoy it. And remember, you got to listen to science and what he says.